Chicago, I always felt, at least in the past, you couldn't last in this town just through hype and sizzle. You had to deliver.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Notes from Chicago. I'm Ashley Phillips. Today, we are so excited to have David Manilow joining us. David is the creator of the iconic series Check Please. He is also the host of the Dining Table podcast, and he knows all of the best places to eat and drink in Chicago. David, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Before we get in to your work and all your amazing knowledge of the Chicago food scene, we always like to start our episodes asking guests, what do you love about Chicago?
I like exploring cities, and I like stumbling into things. And Chicago just has that all over town, and I love the diversity of the city. I love the art scene, the food scene, the people, the beauty of it. I like exploring neighborhoods. And look, I'm a lifer here. So, for me, it's certainly the best summer city in the world.
Yes.
But I've been fortunate enough to travel a lot of cities around the world, and a lot of the kind of world class cities, they certainly have their benefits, but there's an ease here. The people are genuine, and even with Check Please as a show, it's kind of like that's how I was raised. Be genuine, maybe have a little soul. Don't do things that are too superficial, and I think that's what you have in Chicago.
100% agree. That's amazing. Why don't we start with Check Please? That is a show that you created. That is a show when I moved to Chicago from LA in 2003, and when I came here, yes, and I came here, we would be getting ready to go out, and Check Please is a show that we would watch. And kind of, tune in for. I'm curious. I think explain the concept of the show for people who may not have seen this. It's been off the air for a few years, and then tell me how you got the idea for that show.
Well, the concept's pretty simple. It's just because if you talk to my friends and family, they'll tell you I'm pretty simple. It's just three regular people from different walks of life, and they each recommend their favorite restaurant. And then each of the other guests go to each other's restaurants independently of each other. The restaurants don't know they're there. And then they come back and they talk about their experiences. And what I did was kind of curate the panel. So I would try not to have three people that you would ever see sitting together in any other situation. And also three restaurants that perhaps no viewer has been to all three. So actually, it's funny when you said you had recently moved to Chicago, because I would have all these people that I would know if they'd meet me and find out what I did, and they go, "Oh, I tell every one of my friends who just moved to Chicago that the first thing you should do is watch Check Please, because the show, sure, it'll tell you, at least give you an idea of restaurants, but it explores the city for you, and you see different types of people, and somebody might be kind of a South Side guy, or a North Shore person, or whatever, and you get a really good sense of what the city's like, what the people are like, and that was kind of by design, as far as like which neighborhoods was I not serving well, what type of people. I would never have a lawyer and a paralegal on the same show. I made it very, very diverse in different walks of life and different neighborhoods, and and we were in Chicago for a long time, but I've had 10 different Check Please cities over time, maybe
Really?
more. Oh yeah, so funny. Every city thinks they're the only city. I started it here. I just had lunch with my person from Check Please Arizona last week, and that's been on for like 10 years, and San Francisco's been on for over 20. Miami, close to 20, yeah.
Is it still running in those cities? I had no idea.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, the Arizona one, I think they're taping now, so we're just kind of going. She was in Chicago, so we're just kind of going over some stuff. And yeah. Oh, Philly, Seattle, DC. Some of them Kansas City lasted 8 years. Like how many years can you do Kansas City for? So that I did Vienna, Austria. Schmeckt. How does it taste? Oh yeah.
That's amazing. Wow, I had no idea. That's incredible.
Right.
Have you, so Alpana Singh was the host here at for the Chicago show. Did you have any other hosts in other cities go on to start restaurants?
So, well, let me reframe that. When you got to Chicago, Alpina was the host, but
Yes.
Amanda Puck was our first host in Chicago.
Okay.
And and my kind of only rule in with the other cities, because they're all PBS affiliates. They don't have to be, but they've all been, except for the one in Austria. Um, and I had kind of veto power over the host, so I couldn't tell you who to use, right? Because it's your station, it's not my place. But so a lot of people were in either restaurant owners, like the one chefs, um, uh, sommeliers. I think we had a food writer. We had a master sommelier, and a master of wine. Alpino was a master sommelier. Yes, so I don't know. Oh, like in Miami, Michelle Bernstein is kind of like a star chef there, but had restaurants before she started. So yeah, so they're all kind of in the industry, either deep into it or peripherally.
For those who don't know what goes on behind the scenes of restaurant operations, how did the pandemic change the landscape of Chicago restaurants?
Well, like, everybody had to pivot, right? So they had to obviously go to more takeout during that time, and then they had to change their models. And I think it's a shock to the system. Uh, the, I think it's fair to say that there's still aftershocks, but I think right now, if I could like fast forward to today, I mean, the restaurant industry is, I mean, there's a lot of places that are opening, a lot of big places that are opening. So I could say it's thriving. I might be saying that, and some restaurateurs might give me side eye, but I think we're doing great. So I hopefully it's kind of behind us. I interviewed Ryan O'Donnell, who is the founder and CEO of Ballyhoo, which they are just opening their 15th restaurant. Gemini, Danucci, Sophia Steak. That's their restaurants. And he was actually saying during the pandemic, when they went into takeout mode, it actually helped them later on, because their takeout business, from what they have learned during the pandemic, is incredibly robust now. So kind of unintended opportunities that has worked for them, and so they put it into their model now. He said they think they have a much bigger takeout business now than they probably would have had if not for the pandemic.
Yeah, that makes sense. I kind of wondered that as well. There's a restaurant that I really love in Humboldt Park called Kaizen, and they're they're teeny tiny omakase sushi, maybe like 20 tables, and they never did takeout. And then during the pandemic, I went and got a birthday takeout meal for myself there, and like there was so many people. There were so many like orders piled up at the front, and certainly for them, where they're so small, I wondered, one, if they were able to serve more customers, like by doing like during that time, and two, I assume also that then kept them afloat, since they weren't able to.
Sure.
Yeah.
So let me just do an aside. I don't like when people ask me, and which they do all the time, what my favorite restaurant is. I deflect.
Yeah.
But I have probably sent, and you can ask the brothers, 50 people to Kaizen.
Oh, really?
I
So
asked
funny.
them if they could cook for a birthday at my house one time, but they said they can't
Oh,
because they're just too busy. No, that's the only restaurant I've ever asked. Not for free, just like do a party.
Sure, sure.
Yeah, like I've known them when they were BYOB.
Oh, wow.
Before
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
before they built the second part of their restaurant, which, by the way, the chef owners, brothers, they're identical twin brothers, they did it by hand. They built that second part by hand. They did it. They didn't hire contractors. They just built it out themselves. So I love that place. I've been there, gosh, 20 times.
Kaizen is one of my favorite restaurants in Chicago.
Sure.
The space, the food's amazing. The space is so cool. I like how intimate it is. It's just if it feels very. Also, I think there's like a if you know you know like kind of vibe about it, which is always fun.
Yeah, I like that, but Kaizen's a good example of a restaurant where you feel like you're exploring a little bit, which is great about Chicago. So you can love River North and West Loop, and that's cool. In Andersonville or Logan Square, those are great. But when you find a place like at wherever they are, 2600 West on what is it, Division, Chicago.
Chicago, yeah.
Yeah, Chicago Avenue, where you're kind of like, there's like auto parts dealers and then Kaizen and then a little store and then Black Beetle, I think, is down the street or whatever. I don't even know. And then you've just, you can park. You can like park.
So novel, so nice. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I love those guys.
Now you're the host of the Dining Table podcast. What inspired you to start that podcast?
When Check Please ended, I had a bunch of people kind of like trying to figure out if we could work together. And Crain's, Jim Kirk, who's the publisher at Crain's, came to me. And they're real pros, and I like the fit. And so I like the idea. I'm just curious by nature, It's just kind of so I've kind of always led my professional life like, yeah, if I find it interesting, maybe you'll find it interesting. I don't know. It's like, and so I thought this was a good way of interacting with the restaurant community, the food community, and talking to interesting people. And there's all kinds of great stories in Chicago in the food industry, whether you're an entrepreneur or a chef, or look, I was just out at the Stony Island Arts Bank, which is near the new Obama Center, and they're doing a high tea, which I think is really cool. And they're doing it like a 2-hour segments, Theaster Gates, and Hedgie Black, and so what I try to do is before I interview someone, I try to experience either their restaurant or whatever they're doing, because I don't just like asking questions that are, I like to be able to understand who they are and what they're doing before I ask a question. So that gives me a leg up, and it also allows me to keep on exploring restaurants and people, so which is great.
I'm curious, so you've been doing this for a long time, and you've been involved with the Chicago restaurant scene for a long time. How has like the public perception changed about like the restaurant industry? Meaning that like I'm even thinking, I'm trying to think. For myself, I'm trying to think: is this like my budget has changed and I've become interested in like more things? So I'm more interested in like having a different type of weekend or evening experience versus pop culture things like. You do really have this concept of celebrity chefs. The Bear, I think, brought a lot of, maybe for people who weren't as tuned into restaurants or restaurant culture or the dining scene, maybe brought them more into it. I'm curious, like, if you have perceived that, how it's changed, if you've seen changes, just maybe like restaurants in like this idea of dining, or it's not even fine dining, but just dining in culture.
Well, first of all, I want to know how has your experiences changed?
I think maybe my interest, I have many thoughts on this. Maybe like my interest has changed, or like my I've lived in cities all over the place. So when I moved to Chicago, I moved here for grad school. I was a poor grad student. I moved from LA. I've always been interested in like eating amazing food. That's been like always like very important to me. When I moved to Chicago, I felt like I got exposed. And again, I don't want to comment on LA's dining scene now because I haven't lived there in a very, very long time. But at the time, and again, I was very young and poor, and when I lived there, but I didn't like, there wasn't excitement around food, like a dining experience, air quotes, in LA in the same way. So the things I was eating in LA that I were like, this is amazing food, would be like tons of Mexican food, like tacos, and there's, when I came to Chicago, there were obviously like sort of all these different, I'll say like, levels of dining experiences. And so much of that seemed very accessible. I also, when I was in grad school, interned at Chicago Magazine as a fact checker in the dining department. So I worked with, you probably know these people. I worked with Penny, and I worked for Jeff Ruby, and like I worked for all these people. So I got exposed like to dining that way. After grad school, I moved to New York. I promise I'll get to a point with the story, but I moved to New York. And again, like everything's so expensive in New York. And so I felt like there are like all these amazing dining experiences, and they felt like a little bit inaccessible. And also I was then searching for some of the food, like some of the food that I had in Chicago and also in LA that like where, the Mexican food in New York is just not as good, and like I mean, it's just not, like there are other things there, but like not great Mexican food. We eventually moved back to Chicago. And I think like having that, like all the big three, like having the experience of all those three cities, then moving back to Chicago in 2009, and like all these things I think in 2009 were happening with dining in Chicago. I think that's like, I feel like, a VAC had been going, but like the Publican opened and sort of, anyway, I obviously love food. So, but my comparison, what I always talk to people about is that food in Chicago feels like so central, like eating in Chicago feels like so central to like the identity of the city and living here. And the dining scene, like, kind of whatever you're into, to me feels so much more accessible. Like it feels very easy to find out about, plug into, and, there are, the Alineas and the Evers and the Graces of the world, but there's also, sort of amazing, like, lower end is not the right word, but like amazing, like very accessible experiences as well. And I love that. I don't know. I love that. But I would say like, how it's changed. I think it's changed for me in like my relationship to it. And maybe my ability to access some of like the higher end dining experiences. But I also feel like people talk about chefs, people talked about the bear, like crazy. And so I feel like that sort of has changed as well, like over the arc of time. So I'm curious, I don't know, I'm curious if you've perceived the same thing.
You're asking a little bit about like maybe what the perspective of Chicago from non-Chicagoans as well, right? Because the bear will do that, right? It depends on how deep you want to go. So Alinea changed perception a lot. Charlie Trotter's before that, where people would fly in from all over the world to go and have dinner at these places. There's no doubt. And then those two kind of, right around when you were coming the first time, kind of led to this molecular gastronomy, right? That Chicago was kind of known for. Trotter's, Alinea, Moto, all those places. So it kind of put that on the map. James Beard Awards being here further solidified it, I think. It's fair to say. The Bear is great. So I think you have the perception. When I started Check Please, it was kind of just coming, that's 2001, just coming off of a very meat and potatoes town, kind of perspective. There's still a lot of steakhouses. They thrive in this town. There's no question about it. But you have everything. And, and you're talking about LA. I don't get to LA a lot, but the food scene is certainly, become much more robust. New York has always been that way. And accessibility, yeah, I mean, there's places in New York you absolutely can't get into, right? Don't even try. And you have some of those in Chicago, right? But there's a huge... Chicago, I always felt, at least in the past, you couldn't last in this town just through hype. and sizzle. You had to deliver. Where I thought in New York you could last, you could be the hottest place, and 18 months later you're gone. In Chicago, you just have to kind of like, be a part of the community. I was never a big believer in other restaurants from other cities come to Chicago, and I think they generally found it not an unwelcoming place, but you had to prove yourself. Now with social media and TikTok and all that, I mean, go on Lincoln Avenue to Pop-Up Bagel and check the line. I mean, it's like, there's 75 people standing at line in the late morning waiting for bagels. So it's like, that didn't really happen. Happened a little Kasama when it got super popular. Kasama got popular, I think from the Bear, right? But they were already great. So I think it's changed, like you started with the budget, whatever, and stuff's expensive now.
One thing that has struck me about Chicago, and again, maybe this is everywhere, and I've just lived here for too long, and I'm like, that feeling of Chicago's so special, but is that you can have a fine dining like Alinea, and you can also have an experience like Schwa. That is still incredible, but potentially like more accessible from a price point. I also have not been there in a really long time, and my first experience there, and I now live in that neighborhood, and I didn't at the time. And similar to Kaizen, like I was walking into this restaurant, and across the street is like it's on Ashland, but it's like across the street from like some like auto, like lots of neon, like auto body shop. And the experience of going there, the food was incredible, and the experience of going there was so fun. Like it was truly an experience. Yeah.
And they kind of blew up early, and you never knew if they were going to be open, even if you had a reservation. And a Tuesday night for them was no different than a Saturday because they were packed all the time, and they went through their bumps. I haven't been there in a while. I think it's still BYOB. I'm not even sure. No, by the way, I love a good BYOB. I love, it's my favorite.
Tell me how hard you think it is right now, and if you think it's harder or not to open a restaurant or operate a restaurant. You kind of mentioned this with New York of like, you can be around, you can be hot for 18, you can be so hot, and then 18 months it fizzles out. Do you think it's gotten harder, maybe because of expenses or for any number of reasons to run a restaurant?
So I'm not at that end of the business, but it's certainly more expensive. That's just what it is. And I was talking to somebody recently about whether they would recommend people getting into the restaurant business. And one of the things you have to have is you have to have deep enough pockets that if you're struggling for 6 months, 9 months, 18 months, that you can maintain. And you have to be committed to, for the long haul. If you're just doing it to kind of like open something that you think is, people are going to like, and you have no plans for if something doesn't go, really well, I think stuff. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of it, I think they'll tell you, is real estate costs and things like that. So the cool thing about Chicago still, it's getting less and less, but still, where I don't think you can do this in Manhattan, is you can find neighborhoods that that are not populated with a bunch of places or restaurants, and like neighborhoods that now 2 or 3 restaurants in a neighborhood make a neighborhood, right? You can still have that, right? I don't think you have that in San Francisco either. LA, I don't know. But, which I think is cool, right? And so you can find, an entry point as far as price, depending on the neighborhood. If you're going to the West Loop, show me the money.
Yeah. Is there a meal or a restaurant experience that you've had in Chicago that you'll never forget?
So I was thinking about that, and I'm like, I'm not one of these people that can like diagnose, the ingredients like Alpina could. Alpina could tell you every ingredient, every dish, and, but I can't. So I'm not going to really talk about the food, but I was last June, I was at Le Bouchon, which I do love. And we took, my wife and I used to go on Monday night half-price wine night with our infant son, and we would put him in the car seat next to us, and then we would, exhale and have a nice meal, Le Bouchon, and half-price wine. So for his 21st birthday, we took him to Le Bouchon. We did threaten to get a giant car seat to have him sit in, but we didn't. And he had his, first legal drink, if you want to call it that. Yeah, and so, and we were there, and he, I think, so he had finished dinner, and Le Bouchon is a very kind of cozy, tight, you could talk to your neighbors if you feel like it. And he's like, Mom, Dad, can I go out in the car? I just want to hang or make some calls or something. I'm like, sure, we'll sit there. We hadn't gotten the check yet. And the table next to us goes, where'd he go? We're like, oh, it's in the car. And he's like, do you want us to go out and sing happy birthday to him with you guys? We're like, yes, we do. Yes, we do. And so we all left the restaurant and we sang happy birthday to the kid. And he was both, I think, honored and embarrassed at the same time. But, my point about that is I'm not describing the food. I'm not describing, the meal. Le Bouchon, but that's kind of, to me, a very Chicago thing. And Le Bouchon is a very kind of welcoming, give the waiters a hug, get to know your neighbors while you're feeling like you're having a truly genuine experience where people like Le Bouchon, they want you to be there,
Yeah.
And they want you to enjoy yourselves. And believe me, I've been to other restaurants in this town and other places where you walk in and you get a vibe. They don't care if you're there or not, right?
Yeah.
And so to me, it's just kind of, how does a place make you feel? So that was a year ago, almost exactly a year ago, 11 months ago. And so that's my, that was a lovely experience.
That's lovely. And that Le Bouchon has been around for so long, and is a neighborhood stalwart in Bucktown. And it's amazing to me. I think when you hear about, I think there's like what you're talking about, like this restaurants that have been around for so long, they deliver great food, an amazing experience, and just consistency.
They build a trust too,
Yeah.
I think, even I don't want to dwell on check, please, but my rule also when I had the Chicago show, I never did new restaurants, ever. And part of the reason was they get their press somewhere else. They're going to get all hyped up, right? And so I want to do the places that have been around for, 15 years or, 27 years or 3 years. It doesn't matter. That maybe you've walked by a dozen times and never gone in. And maybe I've had people tell me, oh my God, it's in my neighborhood. I walked by it 100 times. I take the bus, I take the L, and now it's my favorite spot. And that's cool. And, so it was just kind of partly exploring and letting people know, what's out there. Might be in your backyard, might be you're driving, 45 minutes to go to it, or you might try an ethnic type that you've never had before, which is cool too. And I think part of what the show did was articulate expectations, and people perceived it as kind of the Good Housekeeping seal of approval, which was not really. It's not in the show's, description. We have no opinion. We're just curating. But look, as a producer, I could have, if I felt like it, put on some not so good restaurants, knowing they're not so good, and that would have led to more conflict in the conversation, right? But we're not interested in doing that. We're interested in kind of like, this is your favorite place, and this is his favorite place, and I'll put a collection of people, and they'll either all love it or they won't, and you just be honest, have a good time, but you'll learn something.
We're almost at the end of our time, and we like to end every episode this way. When people come to visit you in Chicago, what are the things you tell them they have to go do?
Well, I suggest, I don't say, this is, I'm the one that's told what I have to do with my wife and kids. They're like, no, this isn't. I'm like, all right, yes, please, may I have another. Here's what I do like. Here's what I like. Okay, so like for instance, if you haven't been to the Salt Shed and you're Chicagoan, you should go to the Salt Shed. Or if you're from out of town, you should go. But it's like, if you haven't taken the architectural boat tour, which is just fantastic, whether you live here or you're from here, I think it was voted the second best tour in the world, past other than the Vatican, I believe. And it's great. I mean, it's just great. I mean, you're gonna love that, especially on a nice day. You know, I did Tourist Day last year, where I'm just gonna do touristy stuff, and I rented a divvy. You know, I have a divvy membership, so I should say I just took a divvy, and I went from the Bean to basically the museum campus, which is just absolutely gorgeous. That whole ride or walk, and then down to the Riverwalk, which is fantastic. Riverwalk even on a weekend night, it's just rocking. If you are south, so like I was south yesterday, like I was mentioning near the Obama Center, but it can be Hyde Park or whatever, or just coming away from south. Coming south to north on Lakeshore Drive and seeing the skyline is just splendid. And you know, and I like going to listen to, you know, I obviously like to go out and eat, but I like listening to live music too. But I will say this, like, I've gotten to the point in my life where the venue is like as important as the band to me at this point.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you know, not sure I'm going to Soldier Field anytime soon, but you know, give me Lincoln Hall or Schuba's or the Auditorium. Chicago Theater's good. You know, just the smaller places, and listening. You know, because I'll tell you a Salt Shed anecdote. So we went when it first opened outdoors a month, and we even saw some bands that it was like 3 bands, and I didn't care about the bands. I just wanted to go to Salt Shed, and when they first opened, they had a little side thing with picnic tables. I don't think they're there anymore. Okay. And yeah, people would come and they'd grab a drink and you'd sit at the table, and we were sitting at the table. And I'm just, because this is how I am, I'm like, oh, where are you from? You know, thinking they're from Logan Square or Humboldt Park. And they're like, oh, we're from Minneapolis. And the next people, oh, we're from Louisville. Oh, and the next person, yeah, we're from Columbus. And I realized they are coming in for the band, and they don't get those bands there. So what we take for granted on a Thursday night all over the city, right? They have to make a trip out of it, right? Which is great. They go to Chicago, they enjoy Chicago. But wow, the music scene here, the food scene is clearly, but the music scene here and the theater and museums, don't get me going.
We're very lucky.
But I will say this, it's like I think a lot of people take it for granted, right? Maybe people who move here don't, right? Because they're like, whoa, I didn't know. But I think I took a lot of stuff for granted until the pandemic hit, and now I try not to.
Oh,
Now,
yeah.
if people say, do you want to? I go, yes, I
Yes. Yes, I would like to participate in real life with people
do.
doing
Right,
like
yeah, right, yeah.
face to face. Amazing. All right, David, we're going to end it there. Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. Thanks for spending the time and sharing your stories.
I enjoyed it, and thanks for having me. I really appreciate it as well.
Thank you for listening to Notes from Chicago. This podcast is edited and produced by Tanisha Blakely. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to Notes from Chicago on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts.